The gavel hadn't even banged against the wood before Hunter let a smirk crawl up his face. He looked at his soon-to-be ex-wife, Leora, shrinking in her chair, and felt a rush of pure, unadulterated victory. He had the best lawyer money could buy. He had hidden the assets perfectly, and he had convinced the court she was unstable. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was minutes away from total freedom and keeping every cent of his fortune. But just as he turned to high-five his attorney, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom groaned open. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. A man walked in, a man Hunter had never met, but whose face made the judge's blood run cold. Hunter didn't know it yet, but his celebration was about to turn into a funeral for his life. The air in courtroom 4B smelled of floor wax and old desperation, but to Hunter Reynolds it smelled like champagne. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit, catching the light on his platinum watch. It was a subtle flex, a reminder to everyone in the room, especially the woman sitting at the plaintiff's table, that he was untouchable. Hunter leaned back in his leather chair, crossing one leg over the other. Beside him, his lawyer, Donovan Price, was stacking papers with the rhythmic efficiency of a blackjack dealer clearing the table. Donovan was a shark in a three-piece suit, a man who charged $1,000 an hour to destroy lives, and Hunter considered every penny money well spent. "Relax, Hunter," Donovan whispered, not looking up from his file. "We have them cornered. The prenup is ironclad, and her little outburst during the deposition last month painted her exactly as we wanted, hysterical and unfit to manage financial assets." Hunter chuckled a low, throaty sound. "I'm not worried, Don. I'm just enjoying the view. Look at her." He nodded toward the other table. Leora sat there, looking smaller than he had ever seen her. She was wearing a simple grey dress that looked like something she'd bought off a rack at a department store, a far cry from the designer gowns he used to drape her in when she was his trophy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her shoulders were hunched as if she were carrying the weight of the building on them. She looked defeated, broken. Hunter felt a surge of satisfaction. This was what happened when you crossed him. Leora had thought she could leave him. She thought she could expose his creative accounting regarding the offshore accounts in the Caymans. It was laughable. She was a librarian's daughter he had plucked from obscurity. She had no connections, no money of her own, and crucially no fight left in her. "Mr. Reynolds," Judge O'Malley said, his voice booming from the bench. The judge was a stern man, with a face like a crumpled paper bag, and a reputation for hating time-wasters. "Your counsel has made a motion to dismiss the request for spousal support based on the evidence of infidelity presented. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Donovan stood up, smoothing his jacket. "We have submitted the logs. Ms. Reynolds's rendezvous at the Hotel Del Luna is well documented." It was a lie. A beautiful, pensive lie. Hunter had paid a private investigator $20,000 to doctor photos and create a digital trail that didn't exist. Leora hadn't cheated. In fact, Leora had been painfully loyal, even while Hunter was sleeping with his executive assistant, Tiffany. But the truth didn't matter in court. Only what you could prove mattered. And Hunter could prove whatever he paid for. Leora's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Sarah Jenkins, who looked like she hadn't slept in a week, stood up shakily. "Objection, Your Honor. My client denies these allegations. The photos are grainy and conclusive of nothing. This is a smear campaign." Judge O'Malley sighed, rubbing his temples. He looked at Leora with a mix of pity and annoyance. Ms. Jenkins, the timestamps verify the location. Unless you have something substantial to counter the digital forensics, I am inclined to accept the evidence. Leora didn't look up. She was staring at her hands, her fingers twisting a plain silver ring. Not her wedding ring, she had taken that off months ago. She's not even fighting back, Hunter whispered to Donovan, grinning. It's pathetic. It's over, Donovan whispered back. Watch this. The judge shuffled his papers. In light of the evidence and the plaintiff's lack of employment history during the marriage, the court is leaning toward upholding the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Mr. Reynolds will retain full ownership of the tech firm, the marital home in the hills, and the liquid assets. Reynolds will receive the agreed-upon severance of $20,000 and will vacate the premises within 48 hours. $20,000. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover a year of rent in this city. It was Hunter's final slap in the face to the woman who had spent 5 years organizing his life, hosting his dinner parties, and nursing him through his anxiety attacks before he made his first million. Hunter felt the adrenaline hit him. He had won. He had actually pulled it off. He looked over at Leora, willing her to look at him, wanting to see the tears, the realization that she was nothing without him. Is there anything else before I issue the final decree? Judge O'Malley asked, looking at the clock. It was 11:55 a.m. The judge wanted lunch. No, Your Honor, Donovan said smoothly. Actually, Leora's lawyer stammered. We request a continuance to review the financial deed documents again. Denied, O'Malley barked. You've had 6 months, Ms. Jenkins. I am ruling now. Hunter tapped his pen on the table, a rhythmic tap, tap, tap of victory. He was already planning the party. Tiffany was waiting in the car outside. They were going to fly to Cabo tonight. Very well. The judge raised his gavel. In the matter of Reynolds versus Reynolds, I find in favor of the defendant, Hunter Reynolds. The divorce is granted, and the division of assets is ordered as follows. The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were pushed with a force that made the hinges scream. The sound shattered the quiet murmur of the courtroom. Every head turned. Even the court reporter stopped typing her fingers, hovering over the keys. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was old, perhaps in his late 60s, but he stood with the posture of a military general. He wore a charcoal suit that was clearly bespoke, cut from a fabric that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. He held a cane, not for support, but like a weapon, a polished black stick with a silver wolf's head handle. But it was his face that commanded attention. It was a hard face, weathered by years of difficult decisions, with eyes like chips of flint that scanned the room with terrifying precision. Behind him stood 2 other men in dark suits, carrying briefcases. They looked less like lawyers and more like executioners. Who is that? Hunter whispered, annoyed by the interruption. Security should have stopped him. Donovan didn't answer. Hunter glanced at his lawyer and was shocked to see Donovan's face had drained of all color. The arrogant shark looked like he had just seen a great white. Don, who is it? Hunter hissed. Quiet, Donovan snapped, his voice trembling. That's not possible. Judge O'Malley, usually quick to throw out anyone who disrupted his court, had frozen. His gavel was still raised in mid-air, but he slowly lowered it, his mouth slightly open. Mr. Thorpe. The judge asked, his voice losing all its booming authority and replaced by a respectful, almost fearful tremor. The man in the doorway didn't answer immediately. He walked down the center aisle, his cane making a rhythmic thud, thud, thud on the carpet. He didn't look at Hunter. He didn't look at the judge. He walked straight toward the plaintiff's table, toward Leora. Leora finally looked up. For the first time all morning, her expression changed. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't relief. It was a complicated mix of shame and resignation. She stood up slowly. "Hello, Papa," she whispered. Hunter's jaw dropped. Papa, he knew Leora's father. He had met the man once years ago at their wedding. A quiet, unassuming man who claimed to be a retired archivist for the state library. He had worn a rented tuxedo that didn't fit and had barely spoken 2 words to Hunter before leaving early. Hunter had dismissed him as a nobody, a boring old man from the Midwest with 0 ambition. But the man standing in the courtroom now was not an archivist. He radiated power. The air around him crackled with it. "Leora," the man said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and carried to the back of the room without him raising it. "You didn't call me." "I wanted to handle it myself." Leora said, her voice shaking. "And how is that going for you?" The man, Magnus Thorpe, gestured around the room with his cane, taking in the smug husband, the expensive lawyer, and the weary judge. "It seems you are about to be thrown to the wolves, my dear. Fortunately, the wolves work for me." Hunter couldn't stay silent anymore. This was ridiculous. "Excuse me." He stood up, buttoning his jacket aggressively. "I don't know who you think you are crashing a legal proceeding, but this is a closed session. Judge, I demand this man be removed." Donovan reached up and yanked Hunter's sleeve violently. "Sit down, you idiot," Donovan hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "What?" "No." Hunter pulled away. "Who is this guy?" "Leora's dad is a librarian." Magnus Thorpe finally turned his eyes toward Hunter. It felt like a physical blow. Hunter felt his throat go dry. There was no anger in those eyes, only a cold clinical assessment, like a butcher looking at a side of beef. "A librarian?" Magnus repeated, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Yes, I suppose that's what I told you. I do enjoy keeping records. I keep very, very detailed records." Magnus turned to the judge. "Judge O'Malley, it has been a long time. Since the 98 corruption trials, I believe." Judge O'Malley swallowed hard. He looked pale. "Mr. Thorpe, I wasn't aware you were related to the plaintiff. The name Reynolds." "She took his name," Magnus said, with a distasteful curl of his lip. "A mistake we are here to correct. I am entering an appearance on behalf of my daughter, Leora Thorpe, and I am bringing new counsel." He gestured to the 2 men behind him. They stepped forward, placing their briefcases on Leora's table. Sarah Jenkins, the public defender, looked like she was about to faint. One of the men leaned over and whispered something to her, handing her a check. Her eyes widened. She nodded frantically and grabbed her bag, practically running out of the courtroom to make space. "This is highly irregular," Hunter shouted, though his confidence was wavering. "You can't just swap lawyers in the middle of a verdict." "I can," Magnus said calmly, "and I just did." "Your Honor." Hunter looked to the judge for help. Judge O'Malley cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds, given the unique circumstances and the presence of Mr. Thorpe, I am granting a recess. 1 hour." "A recess? You were about to rule," Hunter screamed. 1 hour! O'Malley banged the gavel with finality and practically bolted from the bench, disappearing into his chambers. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Hunter turned on Donovan. "What the hell is going on? Who is he?" Donovan was packing his briefcase with shaking hands. "You told me her family was nobody, Hunter. You told me she came from nothing." "She did. Her dad worked at a library in Chicago." "Magnus Thorpe didn't work at a library," Donovan whispered, looking over his shoulder to make sure the old man wasn't listening. "Magnus Thorpe owned the library, and the land it sat on, and the construction company that built it." Donovan leaned in, close, his eyes wide. "Hunter Magnus Thorpe isn't a librarian. He was the lead prosecutor for the Southern District for 20 years before he went private. He's the man who took down the Valetti crime family. They call him the Gavel. He's not just a lawyer. He's a legal Grim Reaper. He retired 10 years ago and vanished. Everyone thought he was dead." Hunter looked across the aisle. Leora was sitting down, her head in her hands. Magnus was standing over her, one hand on her shoulder, speaking softly. The two new lawyers were already unpacking files, thick, heavy binders that looked ominous. "So he was a prosecutor," Hunter scoffed, trying to regain his composure. "So what? He's old. He's retired. The law is the law. We have the pre-enup. We have the evidence of her cheating. He can't change facts." Donovan looked at Hunter with pity. "You don't get it. Men like Magnus Thorpe don't enter a courtroom unless they already know the outcome. He didn't come here to argue the case, Hunter. He came here to bury you." Hunter looked back at Magnus. The old man looked up, catching Hunter's stare. Magnus didn't blink. He slowly raised his hand and made a simple gesture. He tapped his index finger against his lips, silencing Hunter from across the room. Then Magnus smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. "We need to settle," Donovan said urgently. "Right now. We go over there, we offer her half. Maybe he'll let you keep the company." "Half?" Hunter laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "I'm not giving that woman a dime. I don't care who her daddy is. I'm Hunter Reynolds. I built this empire. Let the old man try. I'll crush him too." Hunter grabbed his phone and texted Tiffany, slight delay. Old relative showed up. Annoying but harmless. Order another bottle of Dom. He had no idea that the phone he was holding was already compromised. He had no idea that the harmless old relative had spent the last 48 hours dismantling Hunter's entire life, brick by digital brick. The battle hadn't just begun. It was already over. Hunter was just the last one to know. The hour recess felt like 5 minutes to Hunter. When they re-entered the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The air was heavy, charged with the kind of static electricity that precedes a tornado. Magnus Thorpe sat at the plaintiff's table, his large hands resting calmly on the polished wood. He didn't look at his notes. He didn't look at his daughter. He was staring straight at Hunter. It was a predator's stare, unblinking, patient, and terrifyingly confident. Judge O'Malley returned to the bench, looking significantly more awake than he had an hour ago. He had clearly made a few phone calls during the break and realized exactly who was sitting in his courtroom. "We are back on the record," O'Malley said, his voice respectful. "Mr. Thorpe, you indicated you had new evidence regarding the allegations of infidelity. I do your honor." Magnus stood up. He didn't approach the bench. He didn't need to. He commanded the room from where he stood. "My client, my daughter, was accused of adultery, based on a series of photographs taken at the Hotel del Luna on the nights of October the 14th and 15th. "The evidence is conclusive," Hunter blurted out, unable to help himself. Donovan kicked him under the table, but Hunter ignored it. "We have time-stamped photos." Magnus turned his head slowly, like a tank turret traversing to face a target. "Mr. Reynolds, impatient. I remember being young and foolish. It's a dangerous combination." Magnus snapped his fingers. One of his silent associates stood up and handed a thick file to the bailiff, who ran it up to the judge. "Your Honor," Magnus continued, his voice dropping an octave. "The photographs submitted by Mr. Reynolds were taken by a private investigator named Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds is currently sitting in the hallway outside, sweating through his cheap suit because he knows he is about to lose his license. But we don't need his testimony. We have physics." "Physics," Hunter scoffed. "The photos show my daughter entering room 402, Magnus said. "The timestamp says 8:42 p.m. However, if you look at Exhibit A in the file I just handed you, you will see a receipt from a gas station in Santa Monica, time-stamped 8:45 p.m. on the same night. The credit card used was Leora's. The signature is Leora's. The security footage, which I have also included on the flash drive, shows Leora buying a Gatorade and a bag of pretzels." Magnus paused for effect. "Now, unless my daughter has discovered the ability to teleport across 40 miles of Los Angeles traffic in 3 minutes, the photos provided by the defense are fabrications." Donovan Price Hunter's lawyer went pale. He frantically flipped through his own copies of the photos. "Your Honor, we relied on the investigator's report in good faith." "Good faith," Magnus laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Mr. Price, you are a partner at Price & King. You know better than to submit doctored evidence without vetting it, unless, of course, you were instructed to ignore the discrepancies by your client." "I didn't know," Hunter shouted, realizing the trap was closing. "The PI must have messed up the dates." "The PI didn't mess up," Magnus said, walking slowly toward Hunter's table. "He was paid an extra $5,000 in cash to enhance the narrative. We have the bank transfer records, Hunter, from your personal slush fund, the one you thought was untraceable because you named it consulting fees." Hunter felt the blood drain from his face. How did he know about the slush fund? "So," Magnus turned back to the judge, "the allegation of infidelity against my daughter is demonstrably false. It is perjury, it is fraud upon the court, and it is malicious." "Agreed," Judge O'Malley said instantly, his face hardening as he looked at Hunter. "The evidence of Ms. Reynolds' infidelity is stricken from the record. The motion to deny spousal support based on this evidence is denied." "But that's not all," Magnus said. He wasn't done. He was just warming up. "Since we are discussing infidelity, and since the pre-nuptial agreement which I have read, and which is a clumsy copy of a contract I wrote in 1985, contains a moral turpitude clause, I think we should look at the defendant's activities." Donovan stood up. "Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. My client's private life is not on trial unless it affects the division of assets," Magnus interrupted. "And it does, because Mr. Reynolds didn't just spend his money on dinner dates. He spent marital assets, significant ones." Magnus signaled his associate again. Another file. "Tiffany Miller," Magnus read the name aloud. "Executive assistant, 24 years old. A lease on a Mercedes C-Class signed by Hunter Reynolds. An apartment in the marina rent paid by a shell company owned by Hunter Reynolds. And most interestingly, a tuition payment to the Fashion Institute of Design paid 2 weeks ago." Hunter stared at the table. He couldn't breathe. Tiffany. He had promised her he would be careful. "This is irrelevant." Donovan tried, but his voice was weak. "Relevant," Magnus thundered, his voice suddenly filling the room. "Because he used the joint savings account to pay for it. He stole from his wife to pay for his mistress. That voids the asset protection clause of the pre-enup, Your Honor." Paragraph 14. Section B. Dissipation of marital assets for extramarital affairs renders the separation of property null and void. Judge O'Malley flipped through the file. He looked up at Hunter with pure disgust. "Mr. Reynolds, is this true? Did you use the joint account?" I put that money in there," Hunter stammered. "It was my earnings. It was a joint account," O'Malley snapped. "Legally it belonged to both of you. You have effectively embezzled from your wife to fund an affair." Leora, who had been silent this whole time, slowly raised her head. She looked at Hunter, her eyes clear for the first time. "I knew about the car," she said softly. Hunter froze. "What? I knew about the Mercedes," Leora said, her voice gaining strength. "I saw the statement months ago. I didn't say anything because I thought if I just tried harder, you'd come back." She wiped a single tear from her cheek. "I was so stupid." "No, my dear," Magnus said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You were loyal. He was stupid." Magnus turned back to Hunter. "The prenup is dead, Hunter. You killed it. Which means we are now in a community property state of mind. 50-50, down the middle." Hunter grit his teeth. "Fine," he hissed. "Fine. Give her half the house. Give her half the cash. I don't care. I still have the company. The company is in a trust. You can't touch the business. That's my legacy." Hunter smiled a desperate, cornered smile. "You can have the furniture, Leora, but Reynolds Tech is mine. It's untouchable." Magnus Thorpe looked at Hunter, and for a second he actually looked sad. Not for himself, but for Hunter. It was the look a hunter gives a deer that doesn't realize it's already been shot. "Oh, Hunter," Magnus whispered, "you really should have done your homework on who I am." "The trust," Magnus said, letting the word hang in the air like smoke. "Yes, the Reynolds Living Trust, established 3 years ago to protect your intellectual property and stock options from unforeseen liabilities, like a divorce." "It's bulletproof," Hunter said, leaning forward. He felt a glimmer of hope returning. The company was worth $50 million. Even if he lost the house and the cars, as long as he kept the company, he was still a king. "My estate planners are the best in the city." "Your estate planners," Magnus said, walking back to his table and picking up a remote control, "are very good, but they are lazy. They used a standard holding structure." Magnus pointed the remote at the large television screen mounted on the wall of the courtroom. "Your Honor, if I may." "Proceed," Judge O'Malley said, leaning forward with interest. The screen flickered to life. It showed a complex flowchart of companies, arrows pointing from one box to another. "This," Magnus used his cane to point at the top box, "is Reynolds Tech. It is owned by the Reynolds Living Trust. Standard. But who owns the trust?" "I do," Hunter said. "I'm the sole beneficiary." "Are you?" Magnus clicked the remote. The image changed to a scanned document. "This is the incorporation document for the trust. It lists the assets. But here in the fine print, look at the initial funding source." Magnus zoomed in. "The initial capital to start Reynolds Tech. The seed money didn't come from you, Hunter. You were broke. You had an idea for an app and maxed out credit cards." Hunter frowned. "I got an angel investor, an anonymous donor. Everyone knows that." "Yes," Magnus said. "An anonymous angel investor who put up $200,000 in exchange for a convertible note. A note that converts to equity if the company ever goes public or in the event of a dissolution of marriage." The room went silent. "What?" Hunter whispered. That's not true. I never signed that." "You did," Magnus said. You were 24. You were desperate. You signed a stack of papers the size of a phone book because you wanted the money. You didn't read page 45. Who was the investor? Hunter demanded, standing up. Who holds the note? Magnus smiled. He turned slowly and bowed slightly to the woman sitting next to him. Leora, Magnus said. Hunter stared at his wife. Leora looked just as confused as he was. Me, she whispered. Papa, I didn't have that kind of money. I did, Magnus said gently. 10 years ago you came to me, Leora. You told me you met a brilliant young man with a dream. You asked me to help him. But you made me promise, never to tell him it was my money because his ego couldn't handle it. Magnus turned his flinty eyes back to Hunter. My daughter believed in you so much, she begged me to fund your dream anonymously. I agreed on one condition. I had my lawyers draw up a convertible note. If you stayed married, the money was a gift. But if you ever divorced her, the debt comes due, with interest and equity. Magnus clicked the remote again. A new chart appeared. Based on the current valuation of Reynolds Tech and the terms of the convertible note, which triggers upon divorce filing, Leora doesn't just own half the marital assets. Magnus paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. Leora owns 60% of Reynolds Tech. She is the majority shareholder. She is your boss, Hunter. No, Hunter gasped, clutching the edge of the table. No, that's impossible. This is a trick. It's contract law, Judge O'Malley said, looking at the screen with wide eyes. And if that signature is yours, Mr. Reynolds, it appears binding. I'll sue! Hunter screamed, his composure completely shattering. He looked like a madman. His hair disheveled, his face red. I'll dissolve the company. I'll burn it to the ground before I let her take it. You can't, Magnus said coldly. Because, as of this morning, I filed an injunction. You are removed as CEO pending an audit. An audit? Hunter laughed hysterically. Audit what? I'm the genius. I wrote the code. We aren't auditing the code, Hunter. Magnus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. We are auditing the tax returns. Magnus took a step closer, invading Hunter's personal space. You see, when I was looking for the infidelity evidence, I found your other set of books. The ones for the Cayman accounts. The ones where you were funneling company profits to avoid U.S. taxes. Donovan Price, the lawyer, slowly closed his briefcase. He stood up. Where are you going? Hunter grabbed his arm. I'm withdrawing as counsel, Donovan said, pulling his arm away. I can represent you in a divorce, Hunter. I cannot represent you in federal tax fraud cases. I'm not going to prison for you. Donovan walked out. Hunter stood alone. The courtroom felt massive, swallowing him whole. He looked at Leora. She wasn't shrinking anymore. She was sitting up straight, looking at the man she had loved, the man she had protected, the man who had tried to destroy her. 60%? Leora asked her father. Her voice filled with wonder. 60%, Magnus confirmed. Do you want to fire him now, or wait until after lunch? Hunter dropped into his chair, his head in his hands. The victory lap was over. The race was over. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost his fortune, his company, and his freedom. And the man with the wolf head cane was just standing there watching him burn. The double doors of the courthouse burst open, and Hunter Reynolds stumbled out into the blinding midday sun of Los Angeles. He felt like he was moving underwater. The noises of the city, the sirens, the traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, sounded muffled and distant. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Ruined. 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 He fumbled for his phone, his fingers trembling so badly he dropped it once on the concrete steps. He snatched it up, ignoring the crack in the screen, and dialed Tiffany. He needed an ally. He needed someone to tell him he was still the king, still the genius, still the man. "Pick up! Pick up!" he hissed, pacing in a tight circle near a hot dog vendor who watched him warily. "Hello." Tiffany's voice was sharp, annoyed, not the sultry cooing voice she used when he was buying her jewelry. "Tiff, listen to me," Hunter gasped, loosening his tie. "Something happened in court. A glitch. It's temporary, but things are going to be tight for a few days. I need you to pack a bag. We're going to the house in Aspen instead of Cabo. Just for a week, until I sort out this legal mess." There was a silence on the other end. A cold, heavy silence. "Hunter," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with ice. "I'm at the Cartier store on Rodeo right now." "Baby, not now," Hunter pleaded. "I tried to pay for the bracelet," she continued, talking over him. "The card was declined. The black Amex declined. It's a bank error. My assets are frozen temporarily because of the divorce judge. It'll be fixed by Monday." "I called the bank, Hunter," Tiffany said. "They didn't say it was frozen. They said the account was closed by the primary account holder, Leora." "She can't do that," Hunter screamed, causing a woman walking a poodle to cross the street to avoid him. "She did," Tiffany snapped. "And then I saw the news. TMZ is already running a headline, 'Tech mogul Reynolds investigated for massive tax fraud.'" "What? That's impossible. It's been 20 minutes. "You're toxic, Hunter," Tiffany said. "I'm not going to Aspen. I'm going to my sister's. Don't call me. And don't come to the apartment. The landlord just called me. Apparently the rent check bounced too." Click. Hunter stared at the phone. She was gone. Just like that. 2 years of gifts, the car, the tuition vaporized the moment the credit limit hit 0. He felt a surge of nausea. He didn't have time to mourn the relationship. He had a bigger problem. Magnus Thorpe had mentioned the Cayman accounts. He had mentioned the other set of books. Hunter's mind raced. The physical hard drives. He kept a backup of his shadow ledger, the real numbers, the ones showing the illegal wire transfers, and the tax evasion schemes on a secure server in his private office at Reynolds Tech. He had been too paranoid to put it on the cloud. He thought it was safer physically near him. If Magnus got his hands on that server, Hunter wasn't just losing money. He was going to federal prison for 20 years. He had to destroy it. Hunter sprinted to the curb and waved frantically at a taxi, practically throwing himself into the back seat. "Century City, Reynolds Tower. Go. I'll give you $100 if you get there in 10 minutes. The ride was a blur of panic. Hunter spent the time trying to log into his company admin account on his phone. Access denied. User account suspended. "No, no, no," Hunter muttered, sweat dripping onto the screen. "I'm the admin. I wrote the code." Magnus hadn't just filed an injunction. He had someone on the inside. Someone in IT must have flipped the switch the moment the court order came through. But who? His IT director, Kevin, was a spineless yes-man who worshipped Hunter. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the gleaming glass spire of Reynolds Tech. Hunter threw a wad of cash at the driver and scrambled out. He pushed through the revolving doors, expecting the usual greeting from the security guard at the front desk. Usually it was "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds, looking sharp." Today the lobby was strangely quiet. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, looked up as he entered. Her eyes went wide. She immediately picked up her phone and whispered something. "Mr. Reynolds." Hunter spun around. It wasn't the usual security guard, old Jerry. It was a man he didn't recognize, a large, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit with an earpiece. He looked like ex-military. "I'm in a hurry," Hunter barked, marching toward the elevators. "I need to get to the 40th floor." The large man stepped in front of him, blocking his path like a concrete wall. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, sir." "Do you know who I am?" Hunter spat, his face flushing purple. "I own this building. I am the CEO." "You were the CEO," the man said calmly. "As of 12:30 p.m., the board of directors has placed you on administrative leave pending an investigation. Your access pass has been revoked." "The board?" Hunter laughed hysterically. "I am the board. The other members are my golf buddies." "Not anymore," a voice called out from the mezzanine balcony above. Hunter looked up. Leaning over the railing was Kevin, his IT director. But Kevin didn't look spineless today. He looked relieved. "Kevin," Hunter shouted, "tell this gorilla to let me up. I need to get into my office." "I can't do that, Hunter." Kevin called down, his voice echoing in the lobby. "I locked you out, system-wide." "You traitor!" Hunter screamed. "I hired you, I made you. You underpaid me for 5 years and stole credit for my encryption algorithms," Kevin shouted back, finally letting years of resentment loose. "And you know what Lyora called me an hour ago? She offered me a raise and a percentage of the stock if I secured the servers. Guess who I work for now?" Hunter felt the floor tilting beneath him. Everyone was flipping. The rats were jumping off the ship, but they weren't drowning. They were swimming to Lyora's boat. "I need my personal effects," Hunter lied, desperation clawing at his throat. My medication is in my desk. You can't deny me my heart medication." The security guard stared at him. "We can have someone bring it down." "No, I need to get it." Hunter tried to shove past the man. It was a mistake. The guard didn't budge. He simply grabbed Hunter's arm in a vice-like grip and twisted it behind his back. Hunter yelped in pain, his face smashed against the cool marble of the security desk. "Let him go." The voice came from the entrance. It was deep, gravelly, and commanded instant obedience. The guard immediately released Hunter, who stumbled back, rubbing his shoulder. He spun around to see Magnus Thorpe standing in the revolving doors. Beside him was Lyora. But they weren't alone. Behind them were 6 people wearing navy blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. The lobby of Reynolds Tech became a tomb. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and Hunter's ragged breathing. Hunter looked at the FBI agents, then at Magnus, then at Lyora. His brain refused to process the reality. This was a divorce hearing. This was supposed to be about who got the beach house. How did it turn into a federal raid in 3 hours? "Hello, Hunter," Lyora said. She looked different. In the courtroom, she had been dressed simply. She hadn't changed clothes, but her posture had transformed. She stood with her chin up, her hands clasped in front of her, looking at him not with fear but with a profound, pitying disappointment. "Lyora," Hunter wheezed. You can't do this. You're destroying the company, our company. If they raid us, the stock plunges. We lose everything." "I don't care about the stock price, Hunter," Lyora said softly. "I care about the truth." "Truth doesn't buy yachts," Hunter yelled, losing control. "You stupid woman! Do you have any idea what I built? I cheated the system because the system is broken. Everyone does it." "Not everyone," Magnus interrupted, stepping forward. He tapped his cane on the marble floor. "And certainly not on my watch." One of the FBI agents, a stern woman with glasses, stepped forward. "Hunter Reynolds." "I want a lawyer," Hunter said, backing away until he hit the security desk. "You'll have plenty of time for that," the agent said. "We have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices and physical records located on the 40th floor, specifically relating to offshore entities Chimera Holdings and Blue Wave Consultations." Hunter felt his knees buckle. They knew the names. They knew the specific shell company names. "How?" Hunter whispered, looking at Magnus. "Those files were encrypted, 256-bit encryption. Nobody has the key but me." Magnus smiled, a slow, predatory curving of his lips. "Hunter, do you remember when you first started the company? You used to work out of the garage at our house. You used to leave your notebooks lying around. That was 10 years ago. And you have a habit," Magnus continued, "of using passwords based on things you think you own. Your first password was your car's license plate. Your second was the street address of your first office." Magnus leaned in close. "So I took a guess. I told my forensic accountants to try Tiffany." Hunter's face went white. "It didn't work," Magnus admitted. "But then I thought, no, he's too narcissistic for that. So we tried Hunter 1. Magnus chuckled. "It opened the first firewall. The rest was child's play for the specialists. You aren't a genius, Hunter. You're just a predictable man with a god complex." Hunter looked around the lobby. His employees were gathering on the mezzanine, watching. Receptionists, junior coders, interns, people he had yelled at, belittled, and ignored for years. They were all watching him with a mixture of shock and schadenfreude. Some were even holding up phones recording. He was trending. He was going viral. The humiliation was total. "Leora, please." Hunter tried one last tactic. He dropped to his knees. It was a pathetic theatrical gesture, but he had no shame left. "Baby, please. I'm sorry. I messed up. I lost my way. But don't let them take me. We can fix this. I'll fire Tiffany. I'll sign the post-in up. I'll do whatever you want. Just tell your dad to call off the dogs." Leora looked down at the man on his knees. He looked small. The expensive Italian suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were wet with tears of self-pity. She remembered the man she had married. She remembered how he used to hold her hand when she was scared. She remembered how he promised to take care of her. And she remembered how he had looked at her in the courtroom this morning like she was garbage to be discarded. "You're right, Hunter," Leora said. "You did lose your way." She stepped closer, bending down slightly so she was eye level with him. "But I can't fix this for you. I spent 10 years fixing your messes. I ironed your shirts. I smoothed over your insults to investors. I balanced our personal budget while you bought sports cars. I made you look like a king while I played the maid." She stood up straight, her voice ringing clear in the silent lobby. "I'm resigning as your maid, Hunter, and as your wife." She turned to the FBI agent. "He's all yours." "Leora, no!" Hunter screamed as the agents moved in. He felt the cold steel of handcuffs click onto his wrists. It was a heavy, final sound. The security guard, the one he had tried to push, watched with a grim satisfaction as they hauled him up and began to march him toward the exit. Hunter looked back. He wanted to see regret on her face. He wanted to see her breaking down. But Leora wasn't looking at him. She was walking toward the elevators flanked by her father. Kevin, the IT director, was waiting for them with the elevator doors held open. "Good afternoon, Ms. Thorpe," Kevin said respectfully. "We have the boardroom prepped for you." "Thank you, Kevin," Leora said, stepping into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off Hunter's view of his empire forever, as the agents pushed Hunter through the revolving doors and into the back of a waiting black SUV. Flashing lights painted the street in chaotic bursts of red and blue. The cameras were flashing. The reporters were shouting questions. "Mr. Reynolds, did you steal the money? Is it true your wife owns the company? How much are you worth now, Hunter?" Hunter slumped against the seat, the leather digging into his handcuffed wrists. Magnus Thorpe watched from the second-floor window, his hand resting on the wolf-head cane. He watched the car drive away. "The wolves have eaten," Magnus murmured to himself. He turned around to face the boardroom. Lyora was sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, the seat that Hunter had sat in for 5 years. It looked too big for her for a moment, but then she adjusted the chair, placed her hands on the table, and looked at the terrified board members who had assembled via video conference. "Gentlemen," Lyora said, her voice steady, "we have a lot of work to do to save this company. Let's get started." 6 months later. The visiting room at the Federal Correctional Facility in Lompoc was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. It was a far cry from the corner office with the panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean. Hunter Reynolds sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor. He wore a jumpsuit that was a dull, humiliating shade of orange. His hair, once styled by a celebrity barber in Beverly Hills, was now grown out and greasy. He had lost weight, his face gaunt and shadowed with stubble. He looked at the clock on the wall. 2:00 p.m. He wasn't expecting a visitor. Tiffany had stopped answering his calls the day of the arrest. His friends, the golf buddies, the yes-men, the entourage had evaporated like mist. Even his mother had stopped visiting after the 2nd month, unable to bear the shame of seeing her golden boy in chains. The heavy steel door buzzed open. Hunter didn't look up until he heard the tap of a cane. Thud, thud, thud. He froze. He slowly lifted his head. Magnus Thorpe stood on the other side of the plexiglass partition. He looked exactly the same as he had in the courtroom. Impeccable suit, hard eyes, the silver wolf-head cane resting against the ledge. But this time, he wasn't angry. He looked at Hunter with a calm, detached curiosity. Hunter picked up the receiver with shaking hands. "What are you doing here?" Hunter's voice was raspy. He hadn't spoken to anyone but his cellmate in days. "Came to gloat." "I don't gloat, Hunter," Magnus said, his voice coming tinny through the phone. "I verify. I like to see things through to the end." "Well, you won," Hunter spat. "Are you happy I'm looking at 15 years? My lawyer says if I take the plea, maybe I get out in 8. 8 years, Magnus. I'll be 40 when I get out. I'll have nothing." "You had nothing when you started," Magnus corrected him. "And you had everything in the middle. You just didn't know how to keep it." Magnus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper. He pressed it against the glass. "I thought you might want to see this." Hunter squinted at the paper. It was the business section of the Times. The headline read, "Reynolds Tech rebounds new CEO, Lyora Thorpe, announcements clean slate initiative and record profits." There was a photo of Lyora. She looked radiant. She was wearing a white power suit, standing at a podium smiling confidently. She didn't look like the mousy, frightened woman from the divorce hearing. She looked like a titan of industry. "She didn't sell it?" Hunter asked, stunned. "Everyone said she'd liquidate, cash out." "She considered it," Magnus said. "But then she realized that the company wasn't the problem. The culture was the problem. You were the problem." Magnus folded the paper. She fired the sycophants. She promoted the people you ignored, like Kevin. She paid back the back-taxes with her own share of the settlement. She cleared the company's name. The stock is up 40% since you left. Hunter felt a bitter bile rise in his throat. It wasn't fair. It was his cut, his idea. She's using my code, Hunter muttered. She's using the code she paid for, Magnus said sharply. The code she supported while you wrote it. The code she owns. Magnus leaned in closer to the glass. She's happy, Hunter. She's dating again. A nice man. An architect. Someone who listens to her. Someone who doesn't need to make her feel small to feel big himself. Hunter looked away. Tears pricked his eyes, hot and stinging. Why tell me this? Just to torture me? No, Magnus said. To give you a gift. A gift. The gift of clarity, Magnus said. You spent your whole life thinking you were the smartest person in the room. You thought people like Leora, kind people, quiet people were weak. You thought you could walk all over them because they wouldn't fight back. Magnus stood up, grabbing his cane. I came here to tell you that kindness isn't weakness, Hunter. It's restraint. And when you push a kind person too far, when you strip away that restraint, you don't get a fight. You get a war. And you will always lose. Magnus turned to leave. Wait, Hunter shouted into the receiver. Does she ever ask about me? Magnus paused. He looked back over his shoulder. No, Hunter, she doesn't. The line went dead. Magnus hung up the phone and walked out the heavy steel door without looking back. Hunter sat there, gripping the cold plastic receiver, listening to the dial tone. For the first time, the silence wasn't just around him. It was inside him. He was truly, finally alone. Leora was waiting in the back of the black sedan. The window was rolled down, letting in the fresh, salty air of the coast. She was reading a report on the tablet in her lap. The door opened, and her father slid in. Did you see him? Leora asked, not looking up from the screen. I did, Magnus said. He tapped the partition, signaling the driver to move. How is he? He is exactly where he belongs, Magnus said, living in the past. Leora turned off the tablet. She looked out the window as the prison faded into the distance. She thought she would feel sad or guilty or maybe even vindictive, but she felt nothing. Just a light, airy sense of freedom. The heavy weight that had been pressing down on her chest for 5 years was gone. She reached over and took her father's hand. His hand was rough, strong, and warm. Thank you, Papa, she whispered, for saving me. Magnus squeezed her hand, his eyes softening. I didn't save you, Leora. You walked out of that courtroom yourself. I just held the door open. Leora smiled. She looked forward at the open road stretching out toward the city, toward her company, toward her life. Driver, Leora said, her voice strong and clear. Take us to the office. I have a board meeting at 4. The car sped up, merging onto the highway, leaving the ruins of Hunter Reynolds in the rear-view mirror shrinking until he was nothing more than a speck of dust in their history. And that is the story of how one arrogant billionaire learned the hardest lesson of all: never underestimate the quiet ones. Hunter thought he had won the game before it even started, but he forgot that in the court of life character always counts more than cash. He lost his fortune, his freedom, and his wife, all because he mistook her kindness for weakness. It's a powerful reminder that the people who support us on the way up are the only ones who can catch us or drop us on the way down. If you enjoyed this story of supreme instant karma and justice, please destroy that. Like button, it really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Hunter deserved 15 years or was losing his company? Punishment enough? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.